I'm here today with David Morton. Can you tell us a little bit about liability issues, workman's comp, insurance, bonding?
Well, those go along with contractors. Now, you had asked the question earlier, the what kind of contractors maybe that you're interested in, and there's everything from licensed contractors to general handyman type of contractors. Obviously, the most legally protecting way to proceed would be to work with a licensed contractor who's bonded, who is insured, and but those protections usually come at a cost. Those contractors tend to charge more because they do have those certifications or expenses that they have to cover. So it becomes a balancing act between what level of quality necessarily that you want, or maybe protection, and what your budget is. And I'm not going to suggest that one is better than the other, but I think as a property owner, you need to be able to do an analysis to determine, cheaper is not necessarily better if it ends up costing you more money in the long run. And there are many ways that that can happen if you run into issues. So sometimes finding contractors you asked about, a lot of times you can certainly go on and try and find people who are advertising. My experience is that people who are, in this day and age, people who are looking for work would be a bit of a question mark. Most of the contractors that I know and that we would want to work with have all the work that they would possibly desire, in which case they're not actively marketing or looking for work. So we try to find contractors other ways. One of the primary ways is to just drive around and see who's working. One of the tricks that I learned early on in my career was go out on a Saturday morning in particular and see who's working. Because anybody who's out being productive and working hard on a Saturday is probably somebody that you might want to talk to.
When selecting a contractor, we talked about liability issues,
Right.
making sure they're insured, bonded. Workman's comp issues, do they come up often?
Well, they come up from two standpoints. One, as a property owner and somebody having work done at their property, at one of their properties, workman's comp is an important issue in that if somebody were to get injured on the property, there's a significant liability and potential financial liability as well. Really, what you're trying to do is make sure that your contractors or your subcontractors have workman's comp. One of the things that we require is proof of insurance, both from a liability standpoint or whatever in their bonding, but also that they have and provide workman's comp to their employees. The last thing that we want is somebody to get hurt on the job site, but we also want to make sure that if somebody's hurt, that they have the coverages and the protections that they would need to get help and time off, and perhaps to get better. We've certainly seen those situations, and having workman's comp is an important requirement. So it's easy to ignore it. It's easy to try and avoid it because it's going to cost both your contractors and you some amount of money to have those protections. But like all insurance, it's inexpensive when you don't need it to try and avoid it. But when you do need it, you need to hope you've been smart enough to have the protection. From a workman's comp standpoint, as one of the issues that contract or subcontractors may offer up is a waiver. We've had people present us with a workman's comp waiver from their additional subcontractors. And there are legal opportunities to have a waiver. It's a little bit of a tricky situation, and I would certainly recommend having a discussion with an attorney or the appropriate authorities to find out when a waiver is appropriate and when it's not appropriate. It's a technical issue, and you know, if there's a situation, you want to make sure those are the T's you cross and the I's you dot, because relying on somebody else's guess as to what the appropriateness is a bit of a risk as well. So I wouldn't just flat out take your subcontractor's suggestion that a waiver from the people he's bringing on site or that they're bringing on site is sufficient. It is an opportunity. There are cases where it's relevant, but there's also many cases where it's not relevant. And waivers from an additional subcontractor might be relevant versus an employee of the contractor. So it's always good to understand the workforce that you have at your property. You may be hiring a contractor. They may have people on site with them, or they may be sending people out to your site. So it would be prudent for you to understand, are those employees, are they subcontractors? And if you're getting a workman's comp coverage, you need to make sure that that's actually flowing through to the people who are on site.
So you can get workman's comp coverage just for the job?
You can get workman's comp coverage. I would say I would talk to your insurance agent or the provider to determine how broad or how specific a policy may be able to be applied. You know, how much are you buying? How specific the time period that may be relevant. You know, if you're going to just be rehabbing one house, your exposure is fairly limited. So those are discussions that you ought to have with a trusted advisor. We're certainly not that person. We rely on those trusted advisors as well. So, and everybody's situation is different.